Welcome to Saltwater Reasonings, a listening library of conversations, reflections, and collective knowings rooted in Caribbean traditions of thought and care. I am Tracy Rogers, and this series invites us to sit with the tides, to listen, reflect, and remember that knowledge is never neutral, and neither are we. In this first episode, I am joined by Dr. Yentyl Williams, a Caribbean scholar whose work challenges how knowledge is produced, recognized, and circulated. Together, we explore the idea of reasoning, not only as a practice of dialogue, but as a methodology, one that centers the Caribbean as a legitimate site of theorizing. We talk about the politics of citation, the everyday labor of intellectual resistance, and what it means to claim space for Caribbean epistemologies in global academic conversations. So let us begin with curiosity, respect, and the salt water that connects us.
Tracy, thank you so much for this space to share with you, to reason, to share what we do when we like and whenever we like with others. I think it's a powerful platform that you have chosen to share.
We live through the stories we tell and imagine about ourselves. That's the essence of our lives. So stories matter.
Yeah.
Which we know as Caribbean people.
Tracy, one of the things I was thinking when I was like, okay, what's this reasoning going to be? And especially as we're doing it more publicly. And one of the stories is our story of how we met.
Yes.
And how profound that was when we realized actually this meeting has been 36 years in the making.
Yes.
So we met in Belize 2024 last year. And I remember the specific moment because Tracy was wearing a beautiful African print top and I was wearing an African print top, and we both kind of looked at each other like, nice top, nice top. And then, oh, I hear Trini accent. Okay, Trini, I'm Trini too. I don't have the accent, but I'm Trini. And fast forward, what is it, 3-4 days? So we've done the conference now, and we both had the same plans to spend a day or two after and go to an island and chill and explore.
Yes.
And our movements just aligned.
Yeah.
And while we were there on that island, I happened to speak French to the owners of the place where we were staying. And I explained, oh, I speak French because my mother's name is completely French, although she doesn't speak a word of French. We're from Trinidad. And then I said, my mother's name is Edith Lachapelle. Tracy, do you remember?
That's my dance teacher from when I was 5 years old or 6 years old. Yeah.
And then he said, the last time you saw my mum, she was pregnant. We worked out chronologically. My God, she was pregnant with me.
And it was, so I was a child, and I danced with Carol Ashbell School, from like probably 5 to 10, 6 to 10. And I have very fond memories of Carol Ashbell and Edith LaChapelle and what that meant. You talk about dance, you talk about Carol Ashbell, you talk about Noble Douglas. I feel really honored to have had that touch my life at a very early stage. And I think it's also part of what nurtured my creative spirit. So it was just an amazing synergy. I was completely shocked. And it was a beautiful encounter.
And just, I'm thinking back about that moment. For me, it was so profound. And as we reason about the stories, I will never forget that moment, Tracy, because we were in this very idyllic spot, and we come from an idyllic region where we just look around and travel and we just say, wow, our region is really blessed. This world is a really beautiful place. And we were in this stunning island with beautiful sea, mangroves, white sand, sun setting. And we realized, okay, this connection was meant to be.
Yeah.
And just linking it back to my own story, it's something that whenever I have to do presentations now in academia at UWI, at the Faculty of Law here in Mona or elsewhere, anywhere in the world, I always have to ground my presentations before I begin that I wouldn't be here without my parents, without my parents' consciousness, without the socialization I had and their choices to imbue and embed certain values, and particularly Rastafari philosophical values within me, which continue to guide me to this day. And yeah, even though, as the accent betrays, I grew up abroad, one cannot remove the root from where the root is from. So in everything I do up to now, Tracy, you know, my substantive academic work looks at intellectual property protection for authentic origin products in agro trade.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go into more in depth in that. But that whole choice and where I am now substantively in my life is a result of that conscious upbringing, the uprooting also from my pays natal of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
The choice of my parents to say, okay, you know, we know what it's like to grow up as Rasta in Trinidad and the issues that one can face. And because of virtue of opportunities, they said, okay, you know what, let's go to England. But fast forward 20 something years, living between London, Paris, Bruges, Brussels, then back to Bristol to do my PhD, you know, there's no place I'd rather be than back home.
Yeah. And you're still into the bone, regardless of where you have traveled.
And Tracy, guess what came back to mind when I said back home? Because the region is our home. Freetown Collective, take me
home. I love that. So, you know, it's hard for me to think about reasoning as an academic and not think about groundings as well, right? And I feel the linking the two, right? Because reasoning, as Walter Rodney will have it, is this way that we ground. And we could talk about grounding with my brothers and then grounding with my sisters, because they are also some amazing Black feminists, Caribbean feminists, writing about the importance of relationality and connection. And I'm hearing you talking about who you are and how you came to this work. Like, no matter where the path was, you're deeply rooted in this work. So maybe we could reason a little bit about, like, what do you think makes reasoning a valid and radical epistemology? Maybe that's where we start. What makes it valid? What makes it radical?
So I like that you reference Rodney, and I think at some point we should talk about also his works, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and that dialectic of development and development.
Yeah.
Although I won't jump to that yet. So let me answer your question. I'm revealing the way my mind works and why I work on so many different things. Reasoning is so important for me because of its resonance. And what I mean by resonance is something that happened again recently. I think it's when, for me, you get to a certain stage and you realize, whoa, I have not realized that maybe I haven't been living in my authenticity. And this is an opportunity, something resonates with me and I have to live this out. And I say that in the sense of a recent feeding I had with a methodological framework I use in law called Third World Approaches to International Law. And this is a body of scholarship from its origins, started with African and Indian scholars in Harvard in the 90s. And the network has evolved, it's decentralized, it's polycentric. It proposes a methodology whereby we cannot accept law as it is. We have to critically engage with it in a three-part way. So we have to deconstruct the law. That means exposing any remnants of colonialism that remain in the law. We have to reconstruct it. That is, understanding that the law can be a valuable tool, but we need to be purposeful about what it's going to do in our post-colonial reality. And third, it must be emancipatory and contribute to poverty eradication, which in my workings of the law in agricultural trade and intellectual property for former plantation economies like ours, and there we cite Beckford, that's absolutely vital. When I was doing my PhD, of course, we are given and told to engage with many different scholars, many of whom are Western. And in some extra reading, some Google searching, I came across TWAIL on the one hand. That's the legal methodology that I chose to use that resonated. Like, the level of resonance was just like, I have to use these people. I'm going to convince my academic supervisors, gatekeepers, that this is what I'm going to ground my PhD in. I'm sorry, Foucault. No, not you. Sorry, whoever else. And I really haven't looked back. And so it was at a recent seminar that I asked a Western scholar who was critiquing Twail, but at the same time acknowledging its relevance. I had to ask them, what did you feel when you came across this work? And for me, what is stark and important is that the way, whether we want to call ourselves Caribbean, global South, developing context, whatever we want to frame it as, when things resonate, it's important and we have to listen to that feeling. So this scholar, a West European scholar, actually said they didn't understand the methodology. They didn't understand the approach. It took them a long time. They grappled with it. I think they said 2 to 3 years it took before they understood it. For me, it was instant. Reasoning is like that for us. It's our way of relating.
Absolutely. The thing that I hear too when you speak is just that epistemic trust. Like, I trust this?
That's true.
And there's so much shame. Yeah, there's so much shame around, a lot of times around our cultural roots, the way that things look. Nut Hill Carnival has been in the news and in ways in which Caribbean bodies are being read as crude and vulgar in many ways. I know that's been coming up, but there is a way that you know what you know, and it's deep. That's in your bones, and it is ancestral wisdom and knowledge that is living. It's an embodied experience, and there's science to that as well. We can look at just that epigenetics and how the things that our ancestors survived has biologically stayed with us and permeated our being and shows up in our practices. So that epistemic trust, where you go, I know, and fighting against epistemic shame, I think that is the decolonizing work right there. I think decolonization as a term could sometimes get abstract. Sometimes it seems like the new in thing, but it's really about confronting the ways in which we have been taught that our knowledge systems are invalid. And it's that reclamation and trusting of self, sometimes with little evidence, just because this is this thing I'm going to ground my work in. My body is my evidence. Yeah. And body as data, which is a whole other story by itself. So it sounds like just an extremely powerful moment.
Yes, and I'm glad you can also ground that reasoning so well with how you explain it, because I also recognize, and this is how also I entered into the circle of Caribbean research methodologies. It's that realization that sometimes, again, you are in a space and you're conditioned to be in a space. In this space, I'm talking about academia, but through the tension one can feel in certain spaces like academia, you have to learn, pass an exam, and then you go to the next level, and you have to repeat and repeat and repeat. With Caribbean research methodologies, Tracy, it was the same thing like Twail. It's not something that was on a curriculum or syllabus anywhere. It was this gut desire that I have to look for something more. There has to be something more doing something out there. And that's how I discovered Caribbean research methodologies, the work of Camille Nakid, Margaret Chateau Nakid, Shakisha Wilson-Scott, Anna Fernandez, Sanatan. And that's how I was welcomed into the Caribbean research methodologies family.
Yes.
Because at the same moment, while I was searching within law, I also knew that law in itself didn't have the answers, and that actually had to reckon with myself and my own positionality. Why am I here? Why am I in academia? Why am I wanting to do all this? Why am I wanting to align myself with academics who say they have to be oppositional to law? They have to understand the intellectual consciousness that surrounds the legal endeavor. And that's where it really clicked. And I said, it's because of my Rastafari upbringing. It's because we have to take an oppositional stance to Babylon. We have to understand what that means. And then I started just seeing the convergences between the legal methodological approach of deconstruction and Bun Babylon.
Yeah.
Why would we accept something that's still colonial and we're in a post-colonial time? No. And I felt really blessed to be in a space where I reached out to Camille, Margaret, and was invited to be part of the Affirming Methodologies project. And immediately, something that I also grapple with, because it's so natural for me to reach out to others. I reached out to my brother and my sister, Lima Gray, Rastafari historian in the UK from Jamaica, who is writing her thesis on Bun Babylon, a history of Rastafari in the UK, and Chevy Eugene, my Rastafari brother from St. Lucia, who is writing his thesis on what reparations mean for the Caribbean in Toronto. And I said, look, there's this opportunity, let's do it together. I know I can only do so much on my own. And it's not that I even want to do it on my own. This is a collective endeavor. So the end piece that we have, which is a chapter on groundings as a methodology and reasoning as its tool, drawing on Rodney's application of his interactions with Rastafari in Jamaica, is a result of that collective endeavor. And we developed the chapter through reasonings, just like this, because we developed it over COVID. So at the time, I was happily marooned in Jamaica. Email of my life, British Airways said, oh no, we have to cancel your return trip. I said, that's fine. I'm living my best life in Jamaica. And we developed that chapter through reasoning.
Yeah. So making this connection with Caribbean research methodologies, and Camille is going to actually be on the reasoning as well. And our filming methodologies are coming from a place of let us think about how we know who we are, how we learn about ourselves. Let's think about research that comes from us, that does not have to be in response to anything else, but we're filming it because we know it. And so that chapter, I guess I want you to talk a little bit about that chapter. And then the other connection that I see, when I first came across Walter Rodney's work, first of all, it took too long. Like, I don't understand why I didn't learn about Walter Rodney in high school. But when I read his work, I was like, what? Everything about it felt true. Everything about it felt affirming of what I know. And so and I often imagine him in Mona. I have this image of him leaving the classroom and having these reasonings with Rastafari. And when I think about that, and I think about the work that you're now doing, which is about protecting people legally when it comes to their creative products, who will not usually have a voice. It feels like such a natural extension of Rodney's work. So I guess I want to invite you to tell us about the chapter. We'll definitely put a link to it in the program. And then talk about that connection to how we carry Rodney's work on and into the realm of protection, legal protection for people who are creatives, for people who are marginalized and taken advantage of so often. That's a lot.
No, Tracy, this is the beauty of reasoning, truly, because you have made me understand something that I didn't necessarily make the connection with before. And I'll explain that. I'll keep that there and explain it. So the chapter was a really organic development of, again, life stories. I was connected to Alima through a Rastafari professor in the UK, and we used to go every year to Emperor Haile Selassie's former residence in Bar for his Earth Strong and be there as part of the Rastafari gatherings and reasoning. Chevy and I, we met online through my work. We still haven't met in person. We should be meeting in October this year. And it's just a resonance of who we are and things connecting. So when the opportunity came to write the chapter, our own life journeys and paths had been a connection already or collection of groundings and reasoning. So it was therefore just a natural expression and also a nice challenge to now put what we do naturally, how we relate naturally onto paper. And what was so beautiful is that we all come from different disciplines. So Alim is a historian, Chevy is in the field of Caribbean studies, and I'm an interdisciplinary scholar with a PhD in law. So it was interesting, but also just, beautiful and organic. So just quite literally, the chapter starts off with placing and contextualizing the African-centered nucleus of Rastafari, to quote Muta Baraka, who is there, the link with Caribbean research methodologies and the work of Camille et al. That we want to promote affirming methodologies are ways of doing, being, seeing, knowing within academia. And recognizing how relevant what the Rastafari community already do is, or inside academia, and how it can have an impact outside academia. Alima wrote the first part, which was on the history of Rastafari and groundings from the Jamaican context. I wrote the second part, which was its application in an interdisciplinary and scholarly way, and that connection between the values, tenets, philosophy of Rastafari, Bun Babylon, the liberty as an intellectual consciousness, and how that connects with academic inquiry. And then Chevy wrote the final part, which was on a case study on his own experience coming to Jamaica and conducting groundings. Grounding as a verb. So that's what the chapter does. I encourage our listeners, our viewers to engage with it.
Yeah.
And then I think what's always very fascinating in this journey is that everything is a piece and like a root, like a tree with a root. You have your root and then you'll branch in different places. As we're acknowledging, you have the, or my work, part of it is in Caribbean research methodology. Some of it is in intellectual property. I do consulting with private sector. So it's all linked. But the linkage that I think you underlined, which I really like, is that organic linkage between the Rastafari chapter and my own impetus to say, I can't write this on my own. And this wouldn't be what it is on its own. It is an I and I. It is I am because you are. I am because we are. I could not be where I was without the interplay of the different reasonings around me. And so Chevy and Alima have been vital to that chapter and that process. But the logic and the praxis behind that is one about community. And that's also how I got into the type of law I work on. Because intellectual property law at its basis is about private individual rights.
Yeah.
The niche area of intellectual property law I'm interested in is about community rights. It is that one area that says, actually, no, a whole community can own the right to protect a product based on the quality, reputation, and characteristics of the product linked to its geographical territory. And those laws are called geographical indication laws. So I had to then, reason with myself as well. Why am I interested in this? And it goes back to how I was brought up, the intellectual consciousness. I want development for my region. And it's not just the territory of Trinidad and Tobago. No, it's for the region. Our post-colonial nations, peoples, we deserve to live with dignity. And I don't think that will happen with the pursuit of individuality. It will happen on the basis of community action. And hence, that's why I choose one of my life commitments is to work on this geographical indication law and understand how these laws can benefit us in the Caribbean. Because at the end of the day, we know that they are colonial tools. They were birthed in the colonial epoch. They are part of that history of extractivism and exploitation. The laws weren't meant for us. We got these laws in the region, it's 20 years ago. And for Jamaica, for example, we've only started using them 10 years ago. The Europeans have built up the laws, like champagne is the most famous geographical indication. That means any sparkling wine grown within the Champagne region can be called champagne. Anything outside of that cannot. And expand on that. But let me just move back to our region, which is where we want to concentrate on. So we have so much opportunity to also develop our products. The problem is we have to be conscientious not to develop it in the same way, which continues trends of exploitation and extractivism. We have to reconstruct the law for our own, what we want as sustainable development, what we want as poverty eradication for our former plantation economy societies. So there are so many opportunities to be had.
I guess I want to ask you to speak a little bit more explicitly. The example of champagne is something that almost, well, if you're aware, you could identify with, right? Just what are some of those community geographical indicators that you're working around? I know we have had some conversation about them, but if you could speak a little bit about what you're working towards in this way.
Yes, well, there are lists that exist actually that CARICOM and the Dominican Republic has provided as part of its free trade agreement with the EU, called the Economic Partnership Agreement. And within that free trade agreement, the lists outline all the Caribbean products that can be protected. So they range from Blue Mountain coffee in Jamaica to cocoa in Trinidad, the Antigua black pineapple, Grenada nutmeg. It's extensive. And one of the things is that list, I believe, should and can be re-examined because it was shared maybe going on to 10 years ago. And certainly with my own positionality being back in the region 5 years now, I see a wealth of products and geographical indications are not only for agro-food products, but they can protect craft.
Mm.
And I have seen here, for example, this is a company that existed called Beanie Bud, and they used to support rural, because a lot of this talent is in the rural communities, rural weavers. One of the issues is when someone with this skill and craft passes away, that knowledge is lost. With geographical indications, it's a two-part registration process that allows you to catalog how the item is made, the quality, reputation, and characteristics of the item linked to the territory, and establish a community around that. There's a two-part process to geographical indication registration, which I think is important in the sense of it helps us understand how an origin product can be protected. So on the one hand, you have the GI specification, wherein you explain all the organoleptic properties, that's the taste, the terroir, the unique linkage of where the product comes from with the sunlight, the soil, and so on. And then you have the regulatory body that is comprised of both government, private sector, producers who monitor the geographical indication. So some of them that are registered already include rums, Jamaica rum, also St. Lucia rum is the latest one. And it can be used for so much more. So beyond agro-food, it can be used for craft products. And I think that's certainly an area that in the region we need to move towards. And Trinidad and Tobago has taken a very bold step by registering the steel pan as a geographical indication. And I'm very, very excited about that development. And I think it does signal a strong value related to what we want to do going forward. We want to use intellectual property to protect our heritage items. And one thing I would just also say is that there are many precedents around the world and they're not just all European. One of the examples that I am very interested by and I think we need to learn from is the Indian usage of geographical indications. So saris in India are produced in different ways in different regions, and those are protected by geographical indication law. I think we can use that as inspiration because I think all too often we think, oh no, that's just like, this is just woven the way it's woven. But no, it's not. It has a specific history, there's a specific know-how, and there's a specific knowledge linked to that, as well as the materials used. It comes from a specific soil. It's been grown and harvested in a certain way. And all of these things are things that can be protected for the benefit of our peoples. And then that links to once you can protect it, you can offer the producer communities a way to live in a life of dignity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that full circle because that's the legacy of the epistemic harm, right? When I don't think that what I know, what I do, what I produce is valid because it doesn't come from a European space or North American space, right? So part of that harm, part of that undoing that we're working on right now is being able to trust that, lean into it, and celebrate it. So it feels like this full circle back to Rastafari again for you, that beginning back to Rodney's work as well, which is that grounding static here, not aspirational, but here, and then moving from here and outwards. So beautiful. Fix
Yeah.
Whew. So much. So much. I guess I want to ask, what are you still questioning and rethinking? Where are you at now intellectually?
Tracy, I'm at such a good, grateful, peaceful, blessed place right now. And that is in part because everything I've been working on, I feel has it has accumulated to this present moment where I have my lectureship with UE, and that feels like a great place to be. It's not even a milestone because it's not like a place, but I've been in that zone, but not in this full-time academic way, and it just feels right. So it feels like a good space to begin to connect several dots. And I also realize, or have come to understand, the uniqueness of my trajectory as a lecturer in law with an interdisciplinary background, but a PhD in law. And that's a result of my trajectory, the places where I've studied. And that doesn't inhibit that I can work in law and connect law to societal, developmental, socio-legal issues. And I really see that now there's an important thrust in our societies. And I hope it's one that, well, I trust that I will be part of, and that we're not going backwards from it, but really understanding how the law works for strategic, and I have to say sustainable development outcomes. I think we should not be and could and not be studying things in a vacuum. We need to understand, why are we studying things? And again, now I'm starting to think academically, the ontological aspects of where we're at, the epistemological inquiry needed to get us to where we need to be. And I'm just excited, and I feel very blessed because Mona Law, the Faculty of Law, is a fantastic environment for me to be in. I've been there 3 years in a different capacity, and I was invited to apply for this lectureship. And therefore, I feel that there is an understanding that law needs this connection with other disciplines. And I'm happy with you at the faculty of Department of Sociology, Social Work, and Psychology, that we can make those connections there. I have made some connections earlier on in the year with the Faculty of Science and Technology. And I think that interdisciplinarity is really what drives me in what I do.
Yeah. So I'm also thinking about coming into spaces via non-traditional routes. Yeah. And, it's Stuart Hall that talks about, that maybe when we talk about roots, ROOTS, a lot of us talk about that, but it's important for us to talk about the ROUTES, for the roots that take us here. And like you, I come from a background that doesn't quite make sense to a lot of people. I think I am and have always been in my bones an artist. And so even as a social scientist, I feel I enter social science with my body. Yeah. And I enter social sciences with my imagination. And when we talk about that there's a pressure, at least I felt the pressure to get more linear, like make it make sense. Why are you all over the place? But it reminds me that we don't live in silos. Doesn't happen. Our lives doesn't happen in silos. Why should we show up in this linear path? So I guess that struck me as you were talking about, where you are as someone who's interdisciplinary. I have experienced a pushback in certain spaces. Like, what are you? Where do you fit? What you doing? And so that is something that I work through. But if we talk about that ancestral legacy, that ancestral memory, and we're weaving a life with the threads that we have, instead of going and find somebody else's yarn and trying and make that pattern. And I think when you talk about your path, when I reflect on my path, I know we started talking about me doing dance. I thought I was going to be a dancer. In fact, my mother still carries around this article where I got interviewed from the Express. I think I was 11, and it said Tracy's going to be an actress. That's where I come from. So my path here, like the lens I put on, will always be the lens of an artist, will always be the lens of someone who is deeply connected with culture. And instead of trying to make myself fit, it needs to know that here I am.
Yes, I was, because I'm aware it's a recording, I'm trying not to jump in or invert in. But when you said people don't understand you or get you, I was just like, who are these people? Because I got you. Then it made me think of Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She has a book called Women That Run with the Wolves.
Yes.
And again, I fell upon that book by chance. I was searching something else, came across that book. I said, what a fascinating title. So she has a story in there about ugly ducklings. And as an ugly duckling, you know, you feel a certain way until you find your tribe. And then you realize, oh, I'm not that. I'm not that thing that people project onto me. I am this, and this is beautiful. This is where I'm meant to be. This is where my best self. And this is why I know we have this connection, is because when we met, we were that to each other. And I think it's so important, whether it's personally, professionally, academically, consulting, wherever you are, find your tribe. And you can have several tribes.
Can we just sit in the beauty of that? Not just the truth of that, how liberating that is to get to that point. And my hope that people will get to that point sooner than it took me to get to that point. And then my gratitude for the people who are in my life who helped me to get to this point. But it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful thing. So we have been chatting away. Is there anything that you are feeling like moved that you want to kind of table?
You asked me like where I'm at and maybe what's next. And it's something that I'm maybe beginning to grapple with. And I think this reasoning is making me understand, okay, maybe this is something I'm grappling with and it's something I need to think about. But my current state of groundings, and this is on a personal level and how it resonates at a community level, is about being more stationary. And that's why I say where I'm at right now with the faculty, I'm really, really feeling blessed about. But previously, the previous life working on EU, African, Caribbean, Pacific trade policy in Brussels and traveling extensively, moving lots all over the world. And I suddenly feel a sense of peace and calm that this current epoch of my life is allowing me to be where I'm at, allowing me to ground, allowing me to have these exchanges and reason and not necessarily be global. And there's something there that I'm still working out, because I know that it's in me to also travel, and I will have that moment of travel and expanding this work that we're doing on globally. But for now, I really realize that no, it's you've moved a lot. Settle, as the Jamaicans would say, settle. It's okay to rest.
Yeah.
It's okay to reason with self, not just with others. It's okay to ground with self, not just with others.
Yeah.
And everything happens in its time.
I am loving that grounding, not just with others, but with self. I think that's a beautiful place for us to move to the close of our conversation as we think about being stationary. For me, what came up was silence. I think this has been a season of grounding with myself for all sorts of different reasons. But silence has been part of what I've needed to do to settle. I think that's a lovely way for us to flow. As we reflect on these last moments, I guess I want to ask, what do you imagine that reasoning will become for future generations?
So there's two things I want to say on this. The first, and again, I'm grateful for these exchanges and places to reason and share. In a mini workshop I did earlier this week with the Faculty of Law students, I shared a quote that I came up with. It just came out several years ago when I was in Kenya. I started a non-governmental organization called the African, Caribbean and Pacific Young Professionals Network to provide a platform for young people of African, Caribbean and Pacific origin to contribute to policy making. Because when I worked in the EU, I realized that we weren't present, we weren't invited, and the door certainly wasn't open to us. But by virtue of me being British and European, I could enter any door. And I said, no, 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 no. I'm not going to leave my Caribbean side of me, my African heritage, my Pacific brothers and sisters out the door. But yet, at the policy level and at the legal level, we talk on paper. No, 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 no. So I created the ACP Young Professionals Network, and we were invited to so many places to consult, and we were also actively involved in sharing what the EU ACP Economic Partnership Agreement was with other young people around the world to get young people aware and involved in international trade and international policy discussion. So when I was at this meeting in Kenya, I finished the formal meeting and went aside to have a coffee. And sometimes that's where the most powerful exchanges happen.
Yeah.
Again, more blessings and more life to you, Tracy, for sharing this reasoning. When I was on the sidelines having this little moment of rest with myself, a student came up to me and said, "How do you do what you do, and what advice would you give to a younger student like myself?" Because this was 10 years ago. I was in my early 20s. And I said, it just came out, hold on, let me get it. Build your expertise, pursue your passions, and never give up on your dreams. Say it again. Build your expertise, pursue your passions, and never give up on your dreams. It just came out, but that resonates with me. And I try to include that in every front-facing discussion I have to do, especially with young people, because everyone has a life journey. We have different hardships, no matter how they might come. But once we are building an expertise, once we are focused on our passions, and once we can still dream, we may not be where we want to be, but you can dream about it. That offers such a fertile ground and a platform for, we can move forward. The second quote I have, I'm wrapping up.
No, you take your time, take your time.
The second quote I have is one I also want to employ more methodologically in my front-facing lectures and talks, is my favorite Frantz Fanon. Every generation must find its mission and fulfill it or betray it. So that quote has been with me since around that same epoch, over 10 years now, in a very consistent way. It's been on all my PowerPoints and slides, and it has guided me. And again, that came to me in a serendipitous kind of way, because again, I was in one of these consultations in Senegal on diaspora policies and legislation. And Senegal has diaspora members of parliament. It's fantastic. So we went there to learn about that. Yes. And so does Gambia. And while I was there for formal meetings,
yes,
I didn't make it back to the airport on time. So I missed my flight.
Yes.
I have a history of missing flights and breaking.
And it always works out well.
Something that's only just come to me on this reasoning too. Yeah. So it so happened that I had to stay an extra of 5 days in Senegal or a week. And it was such a blessing. I was able to stay for the Biennale of Art in Dakar. And wow. I had a friend exhibiting as well. And she had told me, and it was just fantastic. So, of course, I went to this Biennale and it had exhibits. There was at least one artist from every African country, including the diaspora. And as I walked into this exhibition, the first quote that was on the wall, a whole big wall, was Frantz Fanon with that part, every generation must find its mission and fulfill it or betray it. And I stood there and it was like, I don't know if it was a ground shaking or I was still, and everything just like kind of reverberating around me. But for me, that was such a powerful moment in my own life, because it was also where I committed to my academic journey, because I saw the power and the legacy in writing. I saw the power and legacy in Frantz Fanon's writing. Yeah. And I saw the power and legacy of a Caribbean person who made their mark matter. And on the African continent, for every artist and representative and person entering that space, you could not enter that space and not read Frantz Fanon. It was there. There was no other way to enter the space, but you had to confront it. And that just meant so much for me. And to answer your question,
beautiful,
about the groundings and reasoning and how we move forward, it's a combination of both those things. It's expertise is developed through groundings and reasonings. Groundings and reasonings is also a passion. It's not something who comes to ground or reason and feels I'm stressed. We don't.
We don't.
Between groundings and reasonings, we can also dream. And In terms of Fanon, Groundings and Reasonings offers a really radical opportunity and possibility to fulfill our mission, because we know right now in academia, there are very few areas, syllabus, where groundings and reasonings feature. And we know the struggle of what that means to get groundings and reasonings into academia, getting affirming methodologies. And I think this platform, I'm really interested to see the comments and the feedback. Do people who are going to watch this, are you aware that academia, even in the Caribbean, is still so Western? Are you aware that we are taught formal interview techniques, but we're not also told that we can bring our own ways of being, knowing, doing within academia? Groundings and Reasoning is a methodology. It's a research tool. Lime and Old Talk is a methodology and it's a research tool. And there are others. And I'm excited. I don't want to think about it, but far in the future, what I want to be able to see that this groundwork that we're doing now, because we are in the formal system of academia, has resonances where we can say every different island is represented similarly to that Biennale. Every different island is saying, this is our way of being, seeing and knowing, and this is how it's contributed to our intellectual inquiry, whether it's formally academic or not, but it has an impact on how we think about our societies and how we think about our development and how we think about the world. So I'm really excited.
Sorry. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. We're also, while we're filming this, I think today is probably the closing, or we're going into the closing weekend of CARIFESTA, which is probably, for me, the closest that we get to that every region is showing up. And just intergenerationally, every region is showing up in a place. So Festa is just finishing up in Barbados. And we don't get to be there this year, but we feel the energy and we recognize just the need for us to ground with each other, to learn and to build and to grow. Thank you so much for this time. It has indeed been a pleasure. We have been reasoning here. Yeah.
Tracy, what you said, sorry, I just want to add one more thing. In terms of, I have certainly felt that, oh my gosh, do I need to be in that space? Like Esther, for example, I would love to go one day. And I think it's important for the young people who are listening to understand you don't need to be in every space. You will get to that space when it's time for you to get to that space. And when you arrive there, it will be the right time. There can be so many pressures on us, especially with this social media, high visibility, information overload world that we're living, that we need to be, for one space I want to be in, and I can't believe I've been in Jamaica 5 years and haven't been, is Calabash, for example. But I know when I get there, it will be the right time. Tracy, we're meant to go to Bath Fountain.
Yes, we are meant to go and get our bush bath.
Exactly.
Going to do.
Yes.
And when that's there, it will be the right time.
When we go, it will be the right time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Give thanks and blessings.
Give thanks and blessings.
So one of the things I really appreciate about my assessment of the Indian usage of geographical indications is that it's what I call an inventory usage. That is, that there is not necessarily a direct correlation to giving this product an intellectual property would create this and this economic value. It's an inventory usage in the sense of it catalogs the heritage, the know-how, how the thread and the colors used and the patterns used for the different saris are specifically linked to a geographical territory. Now, the European heritage of GIs is a bit different. There has to be a direct economic outcome, which is fine and it's okay, and we want economic development. But just to nuance that we can have both in the region. We can have both. And that's, I think, the power of geographical indications, that it's both economic revenue generation, but it's protection of a heritage. And I think that we need, in the region, we need to learn to use it as such. And I think powerfully in my own story, is that I'm here in Jamaica. I have never seen or existed in a place like Jamaica that has such tourism attraction, yet such a lack of linkage between local industries and local production with the hotel and industry tourism sector. And I say that to say I come from a background of international trade where it's about imports and exports. Here, you don't even need to export it because those that would buy it through export are right here on your doorstep.
Yeah.
And so in the case of Jamaica, we have a huge opportunity to use the geographical indication law to protect heritage products. Jamaica honey, Jamaica Scotch bonnet, Jamaica ginger, Jamaica cannabis, hemp, ganja. Those three names have been identified by the Cannabis Licensing Authority in correlation with the cannabis industry or the ganja industry, however we want to refer to it. So it's not just that I make up three names.
Mhm.
And there are so many opportunities. We could have my vision, one of them, and I'm saying it because it's not about, oh, I want to keep it for myself. No. We should be doing this. We should be using it. We should have geographical indication maps. When you come to visit a country, you should know this is our heritage. When you're here, eat this, sample this, try this. You can take this home with you. Maybe there are things you cannot take home with you.
Yeah.
But there are things, there are products, there's the expression of intellectual consciousness linked to our heritage in these products. There are qualities, reputation, characteristics of these products linked to our territories. Enjoy it. And it's not just a product to be enjoyed by the tourists.
Mhm.
Locals, we ourselves, we need to be aware. When we say, oh, Jamaican ginger is nice. And for anyone, who has come to Jamaica, if you order a juice, you'll wonder if you ordered ginger juice with sorrel or ginger juice with cucumber, because ginger is in everything.
Gingers and everything.
Of the Jamaican ginger.
Yeah.
The Scotch bonnet here. I love Barbados, but I had Scotch bonnet in Barbados and I saw my Bayesian friends sprinkling it generously and I thought, ooh, they can handle pepper. But when I tried the Bayesian Scotch bonnet, it is not a Jamaican Scotch bonnet. And that speaks to how the soil, the sun have different impacts on the same product that is grown, but in different places. So the qualities, characteristics, reputation differ from territory to territory. And that heritage is unique to us. It ought to be protected for us first. And also intellectual property protection legally works on that basis. We cannot claim to want to protect Jamaica jerk, which is the first geographical indication Jamaica got in 2015. We cannot claim to want to protect it in the UK and Canada and anywhere else, Australia, the US, if it's not protected first in Jamaica. That's the way intellectual property works. So all of us across the Caribbean, we need to be protecting our products within our intellectual property offices. And then that gives us rights, like the Indian government and community have done with basmati in the US, for example.
Mhm.
Anytime there is an infringement or an evocation of a heritage product in a way that actually does not link back to the territory it comes from, you therefore have a right to go and oppose
Stop
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolute
so that's part of it.
protection.
It's also a battle. And that's also maybe another element that we have to be aware of, that we're protecting something. Yes, we're saying it's going to be beneficial to us here, but we also have to battle and realize actually some people just want to use a word because it sounds nice or brings revenue for other people. But actually what that does is it dilutes our product. And it's not our product that's being diluted, it's our heritage. We don't want to be diluted as peoples. So why are we accepting it?
Right then. You have been listening to Saltwater Reasonings, where we gather stories, ideas, and practices that remind us the Caribbean is not a periphery of thought, but a current shaping how the world knows. My thanks to Dr. Yentyl Williams for opening this first time with such clarity and generosity. If you would like to learn more about her work, visit our listening library at tracyrogers.com/saltwater reasonings, where you will find links, readings, and materials related to this conversation. Join me next week as we continue the journey with Professor Camille Naked for an episode entitled Lyman Old Talk and the Politics of Listening. Until then, may your days be guided by reflection, community, and care.